Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Monday, April the 3rd. Roll call, Bruce. What? Sorry. Could we have roll call, please?
Yes. Okay. Corey Coontz.
Here.
Chad Kiger.
Here.
Bruce Polly.
Here.
Ron Edwards.
Here.
Lori Gross. Here.
Okay, we got everybody here tonight. Minutes for last month, Monday, March the 6th. Is there any corrections or anything? If not, entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from the March meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have 3 items tonight. Docket number 23-22 is New Cold of Indianapolis LLC requesting development standard variance for directional signage on their property. It's located at 904 Edwards Drive. Property is zoned PBI, which is Planned Business Industrial.
Good evening, Board. Thanks for everybody being here tonight. Our first agenda item will take us on the southwest side of town in the Lebanon Business Park, the far southwest corner. We got the screen pulled up here. We can demonstrate New Cold Storage is the area outlined in yellow here. We have Edwards Drive running along the east side, Ken's Foods directly east, DS Smith directly to the north. The applicant's proposing to install 19 directional signs around the property to help transport both employee, customer, and more specifically truck traffic around the property. This is a very large site, very large building, and they are going to need some larger signs than what our UDO standards do allow. I'll pull up the site layout here and try to squeeze this all onto one page. As we can see, north is still to the top of the screen here, Edwards Drive along the east side. In the beige area is the current existing structure. It's about 140 feet tall. I think many of you, if you've driven to the west side of town, you've probably seen the structure sticking up in the skyline. Phase 1 construction is pretty much complete. I think operations should begin there shortly. And Phase 2 construction, which is kind of outlined in the dotted area here in this gray pad, will begin shortly. So they submitted their plans for Phase 2 before Phase 1 was even ready to go. So we know they're pretty serious about this project. Throughout the property, we can see some major drives, both from the entrance around the building, large parking areas to the west, truck parking along the central southern portion of the property, and then some employee and customer parking up front. All of the white boxes that you see are the 19 directional signs that they would like to install along the property. As you can see, most of them, all but 5 of them will be visible, only 5 will be visible from the public right-of-way out front. Everything else will be around the side and to the rear of this 140-foot tall, 500,000 square foot structure that sits out there. I'll pull up some of the signs here that'll be used throughout the site. As you can see, everything from identifying which lanes to use, identifying the rows for people to park in, directions on how to get to the gate, trucks only. I think I jumped a little too quick here. Here are some of the taller ones. These are, pull up my, they have 11 signs that would be 14 feet tall and 8 signs that would be 10 feet tall, and then ranging in size from 56 square feet to 9 square feet to 56 square feet. Our UDO standards do not allow signs that big, but because of the size of the facility and the number of trucks that will be utilizing this property, they wanted to increase the size of this to increase the visibility and make the site more safe and maneuverable for the number of vehicles that are going to be using it. So I'll jump back to the signs here. So again, each of these white areas around the property is where the directional signs are going to be installed. As we go through the statutory criteria that is required for any of the variances, relief from the directional signage, height and size would pose no imminent threat to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. In fact, the additional size will provide better visibility for the drivers to navigate throughout the entirety of the New Cold property, and they will not obstruct any visibility along any adjacent public roadways. As I mentioned, the majority of the signs are to the side and rear of this large structure. The use and value of the adjacent area to the area adjacent to this property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. The proposed signs are in an industrial area with other very large buildings. As I mentioned, most of these signs are behind a 140-foot tall, 500,000 square foot building with only a few visible from the front right-of-way. And then lastly, the strict application of the terms of the UDO would result in practical difficulties on the use of the property. The UDO does not permit directional signs higher than 3 feet above grade, which if you consider that a standard driver in a semi-tractor cab sits 8 feet above the ground, a 3-foot sign is not necessarily sufficient enough, and allowing a larger sign would create a more safe situation for those drivers to see when they're attempting to maneuver the side to be able to see where to go and well before the intended maneuvers are necessary. So in review of all the statutory criteria, the City of Lebanon planning staff does recommend approval of the development standard variance request to permit relief from the height and size requirements of the UDO for directional signs on the subject property. And myself and the applicants are here to answer any specific questions you may have about this.
I have one question.
Sure.
I mean, we're looking at 19 signs. If they come, we need one more here, one more there, are they gonna have to come back for another, before us again to get an additional sign, or does this give some grace?
No, this variance would apply to all directional signage on the property. So if they think that they need 21 signs, this variance would apply to those signs as well.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? You? Would the applicant want to step forward and talk about it or anything?
I don't think you have any questions, unless there's anything that you want us to field.
Does the board have any questions? Okay. Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, so we will open it to the public. Okay, nobody getting up, so we'll close the public into the meeting. And you have something else, Matt?
No, I was actually just preparing for the next docket.
Okay, we need a motion.
I make a motion to approve docket number 23-22 as written.
Second.
Have a motion, and a second. Kelly?
Okay. Corey Coons,
Yes.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Polly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross. Yes.
Congratulations. Motion passes.
You know what they say about big buildings. You need big signs.
Okay, our next item is
You don't have
docket
to.
2323. The property is located, it's Missy Bowman for the Refuge Coffee. The property is located at 1015 Lebanon Street. Property is zoned multifamily residential, is within the thoroughfare overlay district, and comprises of .91 acres. Mr. Reynolds.
All right. Moving to kind of the north central part of our community, we have the subject property outlined in yellow on the screen here. We have Lebanon Street or State Road 39 to the west, Hewlin Drive on the south side, Essex Drive on the north side. The applicant has proposed the intent to put a coffee cart out in the parking lot. for the teen residents to use to build skills, both customer service and business skills, through the use of a coffee trailer. And if you've been by recently, you've probably seen the coffee trailer has been parked out there, I think, maybe for a couple of weeks now, has not been operational, been simply out there. Maybe they've been doing some training with their staff. But their intent is to park the trailer where my cursor is here. They're intending to designate the parking spots along the southern portion of the property here where my cursor is. So they have 6 parking spots that they will designate. Of the 21 spots, as you can see, they do have parking spots that are further to the east and also parking spots along the northern portion of the north side of the building. So they have 21 spaces, so they more than sufficiently accommodate the residential facility that they have existing operations for, and then the coffee cart would sufficiently be served with the 5 to 6 spaces that are out front here. Part of the process as we went through is staff wanted to make sure that the operations of the residential facility was able to accommodate, or the parking was able to accommodate both the current operations as well as the proposed coffee cart operations. So if you've driven by recently, you've actually seen no parking signs and some cones blocking off the areas where they intend to have the coffee customer parking. And what they found, and I can let them speak more to that, what they found is that they were able to sufficiently operate their existing residential care facility without those parking spaces. So they have been able to demonstrate that those parking spaces are not required 24/7. They will need them for time to time when they have family weekends where families come to visit, or when they have chapel on certain days of the week. And that's why we're proposing one of the conditions that we're asked to place, or we are going to ask to place on the approval, is that the parking signs for the coffee be temporary or removable. So they wouldn't designate them as coffee parking only. They would be coffee parking only during certain times of the day when the coffee cart is open, and then they would be available to be used for the residential care facility when the coffee cart is not open and when needed for the residential component. So go through and, so this is very similar. We've recently had some similar requests along this State Road 39 corridor recently. Just a month or so ago, we had the accounting office that was being proposed in a multifamily individual home. Just north of here, we've had the dentist's office that added the hair salon component, so a conditional use or variance of use for that property, and also the property to the south of that. So this isn't unusual, especially along this Lebanon Street corridor, where we do find ourselves to have a mix of single-family, multifamily, small business, and some commercial opportunities along this corridor. So in reviewing the statutory criteria for the variance of use, the variance of use to permit a coffee shop on the subject property will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. The lots are sized appropriately for both the current and the proposed uses, as I mentioned, and has the necessary off-street parking for both of the uses, and will not cause any adverse effects to the adjacent property owners. The next criteria, the requested use variance would not impact the use and value of the adjacent properties in a substantially adverse manner. The proposed use of the property is consistent with the mixed-use character of the adjacent area, which consists of other small businesses. There's mental health offices, there's a chiropractor, there's a pharmacy, there's a dentist's office, then there's also the multifamily uses as well as single-family residential homes. The property is currently zoned for multifamily uses. However, the surrounding neighborhood, again, contains a mix of all kinds of different uses, including other small businesses. So the applicant's request would allow a use on the property similar to other uses along the Lebanon Street corridor. When looking at the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance, the proposed use by the applicant, it is a permitted use when looking at temporary uses or seasonal sales, but those uses, temporary uses or seasonal sales, kind of hard for me to say, is limited to 60 days and no more than 4 events per year. This coffee cart is intended to be used more frequently than that. So we couldn't consider it a temporary use or a seasonal use. So we had to come before you with this use variance to, in order to allow this permanent use, this ancillary permanent use. So they would continue to operate the primary use as a residential care facility, but this would be an alternative use, very similar to the Store My Truck, if you guys remember that, on South Lebanon Street, where there is an existing business that was adding another business to their parking lot. So again, a primary use and then an ancillary secondary use. And then the fifth criteria, the City of Lebanon Comprehensive Plan does designate this area for residential uses. However, the Lebanon Street corridor from downtown all the way north, even past Memorial Park, has long contained a mix of single-family, multifamily, and commercial uses. So the applicant's proposal does not interfere substantially with this land use designation. So in review of all the criteria, City of Lebanon Planning staff does recommend approval of the variance of use request to permit a coffee shop within the multifamily zoning district, subject to the following conditions. That the approval of the variance of use is limited to the coffee shop use proposed by the applicant. Any change in use, and more importantly, any increase in the intensity of the use by the current or subsequent owners of the will require approval by the City of Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals. The next condition is that the property owner does maintain the current exterior character of the property. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, that any signage applied to the site to reserve parking spaces for coffee customer use needs to be mobile and removable to allow the spaces to be used when necessary to serve the parking needs for other events that might occur on the subject property. And with that, happy to answer any questions. And again, the applicant is here, can answer any specifics that you have as well.
Has the city done a study or anything of the amount of traffic on Hewlin Drive versus Essex Street?
Sure. Hewlin Drive is considered a minor arterial street, so one of the lowest level classifications that you can have for a street classification. So it's a minor arterial. I can't remember the exact number of cars per day, but there are 4 levels of classifications above this one that would demonstrate increased traffic or higher amounts of traffic. So it's 4th on the list of when we talk about number of cars per day.
Okay, and then your recommendation, number 1, is to limit the coffee shop, any change in use or increase in intensity. Did you, in your speech, say what how many times that would be a year now?
I believe the applicant is intending to have it open in the mornings during the weekdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Let me double check that.
But it'd be daily?
No, I'm sorry, 6 a.m. to noon daily during the week, and then potentially extending the hours to afternoons if they're able to get enough staff to do it, and if they see the need for it. This isn't expected to be a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts that's going to have a line of cars up and down the street. Hopefully they do. I hope that they have some of the best coffee in town, and people are going out of their way to attend, to stop there and get a cup. But we wanted this condition on there that should the intensity increase to the point where it becomes a traffic problem, if we are seeing lines of traffic along Hewlin Drive waiting to find a parking spot, that we could come back with the applicant to this board and find ways to correct any of those issues. Hopefully not shut down the cart, but if the conditions did present an unsafe condition, then the Board of Zoning Appeals would have every right to do so. So that condition does allow us to come back to you should that intensity increase to a level that is unsafe for the area. It's one thing I did, that we did have a conversation with the city engineer, Kevin Krulik. He's reviewed this. He currently does not have any concerns with what is being proposed by the applicant at this time. Again, he agrees that should it become a popular hotspot for coffee and create traffic problems, then we would have issues. But as it's being proposed to have 5 or 6 spots for a pull-in coffee cart per se, or a refreshment stand, he did not have any issues with that at this time.
Matt, as I'm sure you guys know, this West Ulen is on part of the Lebanon Community School Corporation bus route. Any concerns about large buses traveling down West Ulen with potential cars stacking, trying to find parking spots, or backing out of those spots?
Yeah, so the backing out, and the backing into the right-of-way is a current condition. It currently exists. Whether you allow the coffee cart or not, backing into the right-of-way is still going to continue by the people that work and visit this facility. As far as stacking of cars, it's not anticipated that this is going to be, again, a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts or a high-volume type traffic situation. They're looking at a few customers in the mornings with, again, the current conditions. You're able to park in those spaces now, and you're able to back in and back out into the right-of-way. Currently, adding the additional ancillary use is not anticipated to substantially increase the amount of traffic that would be doing the maneuvers that are happening now.
One of the concerns I have, well, two of them. One, correct, backing out of those spaces is a current situation today, but I feel like with a coffee shop, it's an increased frequency of cars backing in and out of an individual space. And I know this is not expected to be a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts, but really, any more than 6 customers at one time creates a traffic stacking issue.
It could.
And that's not many customers.
I guess it's dependent on, your interpretation of number of customers. This is a coffee cart. I don't believe they'll be doing blended drinks. I think it's strictly flavored coffees and things of that nature. So again, it's your interpretation of how busy you think a coffee cart would be. And speaking with the city engineer, planning staff, we don't feel at this time that what the applicant is proposing is going to generate a substantial amount of traffic that's going to warrant or going to create traffic issues along Ulen Drive at this time.
Can you show us exactly which 6 spots will be designated for the
Sure. Zoom in
cart.
a little bit here. So I believe the intent is where the black car is parked is where the coffee trailer is currently parked. And the parking spaces to the east of this are the ones that would be utilized for the coffee customers. So employee parking would be further to the east. Scroll up a little bit here. And so you've got number of parking spaces to the east, all the way over to the dumpster area, and then the additional 6 spaces along the north side. So it would be these spaces along the southern part of the property.
What is our standard depth of a parking space?
The standard requirement is 20 feet, 18 to 20 feet.
And can we get a measurement on that one to the northeast?
This
there?
one here?
Yeah.
I measured it earlier. That particular one is 17 feet to the edge of the
It would fit a
pavement.
compact.
To the right-of-way is 17 feet?
It is, that very last parking spot.
How about the one to the left of it?
That one to the left of it was just 19.2, I believe, 19 feet 2 inches, and then the other ones were well over 20 feet.
With 2 non-conforming spaces, so really it's 4 available for this business.
There would be 6 available spaces. I mean, they're current existing spaces that are legally existing non-conforming.
That hashed space, is that going to become a usable space, or does that have to stay hashed?
I'll let the applicant address that. That is a space that could be used for additional parking, but they could be using it to allow for ADA accessibility to the facility.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Sure.
If after a couple weeks, or whenever, this becomes a burden to everyone going down Ulen, what do we do then?
Staff would work with the applicant, and more than likely, maybe a temporary stop work order or temporary, stop work on it until we can come back before the board and come up with a solution that can correct the situation. It would be again, entirely, staff would be mindful as we're driving around. I do code enforcement throughout the community. I travel Yulin Drive almost a daily basis.
Maybe it'll slow some of those idiots down, huh?
So it's something that staff can keep an eye on, but also if we start receiving complaints from other drivers in the community, from any of the neighboring property owners, it's something that we could absolutely investigate day of any concerns. So again, we would work with the applicant, staff would work with the applicant, we'd find a solution that works for everybody, and then it would need to be presented back to the board based on the condition number 1 of your approval. Would be any increase in intensity would require it to come back to you guys for your approval.
And
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more the use itself, correct, not the location specifically? So if we get into a position where maybe it is onto Yulin, maybe we could investigate putting it around on Essex, if need be, right? Because that's a little bit lower traffic, but that wouldn't require any additional action from the BZA, because we're just talking about the conditional use on the property itself, correct?
Correct. So tonight before you is a use variance that will allow the coffee shop on the property. You guys aren't approving the exact location.
Right.
They'd be able to move the trailer to another part of the property.
So even if we get into a position where, maybe where they put it in position A isn't the best, there may be a position B, or turning it, or putting it up off of Essex and partnering with the chiropractor, using their lot. There's a number of different options that could possibly work if we get into that position that could be beneficial both ways, I think.
Matt, what does the UDO again say about, what's the reason for the variance request?
Coffee shops are not a permitted use within the
So it's a-
multifamily zoning district.
It specifically calls out a coffee shop.
Correct. A coffee shop, coffee stand, or refreshment stand is how our UDO defines that particular use.
And it's zone multifamily.
Correct.
Would it maybe make sense to have the applicant tell us a little bit about what they might carry? That may,
Yeah.
feel free.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're making the frappuccinos that take like 7 minutes each.
Hold on just a minute, though. Is there any other questions for Matt?
Sorry. Sorry, Bruce.
I'm not going anywhere, so if you have more.
I do have a question.
Sure.
What were the, you had mentioned some other businesses along Lebanon Street as kind of a effort to set a precedence for how we have allowed other businesses in the multifamily zone. Can you name those examples again?
Sure. I believe it was on the February agenda. It was the accounting office that was located on Lebanon Street in a single-family home, or as a single-family structure. They wanted to utilize it as a coffee shop, or, I'm sorry, an accounting office. I believe it was last year, could be the year before. There's a music studio right near the 451 Flats that was allowed to have a music store, music studio within the multifamily zoning district. Just north of this particular subject property, I'm spacing the name now.
Yeah, the hair.
The dentist, Dr. Cashone. Dr. Cashone's office had a second side of his building that wanted to be utilized for a hair salon, that came before you and got a variance of use to allow the hair salon within the multifamily zoning district. And then he came back a few months later and got the structure just directly to the south approved for a rezone to allow commercial uses within that structure. So there's been a variety on that corridor between Memorial Park and downtown.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Now, please step forward.
So I'm Andy Bowman, and this is Missy Bowman. So she's my sister, and we both work for Teen Challenge. So you want to know what kind of coffee? Is that what, I know that he had mentioned, but I didn't know if you guys wanted to specifically know that, or?
I think, is it strictly just coffee, or is it going to be
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Right, so from the health department, we got approved to do coffee, which is hot and cold. So, we'll do iced coffee, lattes, mochas, frappuccinos, and then we can do a hot coffee as well, just regular brewed, or we could do a hot mocha for you, a hot vanilla latte if you want it, or, and then as far as food goes, we're gonna kind of stay away from food other than like a baked good, maybe we got I don't know, muffin or a cupcake or something, but pretty simple. We won't have like hot, we're not gonna have an Egg McMuffin sandwich or anything like that, or anything. We won't be as extensive as Starbucks, but hopefully our coffee will be really good.
I feel that site, I mean, the complete site that you're on is, you can't get much tighter. It's a small site.
Sure.
Is there I would feel much better looking at Essex Drive, putting it over there. I
Which,
feel-
from my experience, Essex is actually busier, at least for us, because I know like even us, we take Essex more because Ullin is pretty tough to get out of, especially once you hit the later afternoon. Like it just took me 20 minutes to get out of Ullin because Lebanon's.
Or in Essex.
Which one? Ullin, yeah, right here. When I would just drop the girls off at the center.
Matt, can you bring that map up one more time?
that's what he
Okay,
said.
there. it goes.
What? I know, he's saying it'd be easier to go back here.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm saying, that's the route. Which route do you go to get out? Because you're not gonna get out of this one.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of Lebanon Street, Ulin's actually very slow. Like, not many people are coming down that way, whereas Essex, that's the route. At least if you're from that area right there, you go down Essex because that's how you're gonna get out. Whereas Ulin, if it's busier, people know it's harder to get out during the day because traffic with that light, and then coming this way, it's just tougher. And so I personally would say Ulin is pretty dead. I don't think in the 2 years I've been here, I've never seen a bus come down Ulin, but I might be wrong. But a bus would have a pretty hard time getting out of Ulin if there's traffic coming. It would take them a while. But we're open, we are open, and really it's just a starter thing, whereas we grow, I've talked to Farmers Bank, and they actually would love us to do stuff on their property, maybe even do it full-time.
I was on your side until, just kidding, I'm with.
But we are open to shifting it if it was busy, and we're starting to get 5 or 6 all the time, we would love to shift it, but it's just kind of a starter thing of, hey, this would be great to kind of start it here, where we're at, but obviously with the parking, we understand that's an issue. As you go a little bit farther in our parking lot on the Ulin side, we have more spaces that are usually open, which makes it easier. Where on the Essex side, we all kind of park over there, it's not as many. Whereas I know we'll have 6 reserved for this, but we do have about 3 or 4 extra that are usually pretty open as well, because we just got that paved last summer to give us more space as well. And so
On an average day, how many employee and how many cars do you have in there
Probably
on a
about-
regular morning?
Yeah, probably about 8, and a lot of our staff, so we have 3 staff, 4 staff cars, 5, 6, so about 8,
If we're all there at the same time.
if we're all
Right.
there. Yep, 8.
And we're talking morning hours, right? So that's gonna vary a little bit as
And being
well.
the center that we are, we're not where visitors are coming. Like, you can't just come visit at our place anyways, because it is pretty close to lockdown facilities for the girls, so it's not like just anybody can show up and get in. The doors are locked, and so we don't have visitors just coming by very often. There might be one here or there, and they gotta ring the doorbell, and we'll come out real quick and see what they need. But it's a very slow, there's no one coming to just visit every single day in and out. That's just other than the staff that works there. So that's helpful as well.
And what was the reasoning behind doing a trailer versus a permanent structure?
Sure. No, that's a great question. We could afford it, so we're not in any debt. We could buy it with cash, and we took it to our board about a year and a half ago, and they're like, man, if you want to do a coffee shop in Lebanon, you need to have a drive-through, one, and so we've been looking and haven't been able to find that, and just finding a good location, and so we felt like this was a great way to start, and just kind of start building relationships in the community on a small end, and as we start to do that really well, our goal is to have a permanent structure bigger, so this is just kind of our small goal. Let's start here, let's show our board that we're serious about it, kind of show the community and people that we're serious about it, and as we grow and hopefully are good stewards and become more successful, we will eventually get a permanent structure. That is our goal. It's just we had to kind of prove to people that we're serious about it first and do this well, so then we can move on to that and hopefully pay for it and not have any debt is the goal, to not be having a bunch of money that we're getting a loan on.
Well, and maybe this is a question for Matt. What we're evaluating tonight is a permanent structure, correct? Is a
Yes.
permanent, this trailer will become a permanent structure?
Yes.
The trailer is the shop, so we're not approving a permanent structure or trailer. Tonight you're approving the use on the property. Should they decide that they want to build a permanent structure, they'd have to go through the proper permitting and development plan process, just like anybody else would if they were adding an additional building to the property.
Does our UDO specify, is it for permanent structures, or does it also include mobile structures?
I'm not sure, I don't think I understand the question.
So we're approving a use variance for a commercial trailer
You're approving a use variance for a coffee shop.
that is housed in a mobile trailer.
That is what the applicant's proposing tonight. Like I said, should they want to build a permanent structure, there would be an entirely different process they'd have to go through as far as development plans.
But as I think you had mentioned at the beginning, we have ordinances for temporary uses for mobile structures, correct?
Well, they're not necessarily mobile structures. You could have a temporary use and a permanent structure, but this isn't temporary or seasonal. This is designed to be a daily project or a daily operation.
So for instance, they have the cafeteria at the back end of their building. This same application could technically be done in their cafeteria on their building. They would be able to open a coffee shop in that location in the existing building. If they were only proposing to open, for 2 or 3 events a year, they could do that under the seasonal
Right.
within that building or in a mobile unit on that property with basically no variation, right? No variances?
Correct.
Is
It would
the
require- it
seasonal-
would require a
Right.
temporary sales
So
permit.
this just allows this property the ability to have a coffee shop zoned with it regardless of what it is, whether it's in a trailer, in the cafeteria, in the back of their place, or they could put it in the front room. They can operate as a coffee shop. What Matt's saying is regardless of what's housing that, this allows that. Whereas if they did want to put on a permanent structure, they would then have to get the building permits to build that thing, but they would not have to come back in front of us for the use of a coffee shop. So if they
Which I
did
may,
want to
I may
put,
correct you there, they would need to come back because it would be
The
an increase in
intensity.
intensity of the use. So if they were to, turn their cafeteria into a permanent coffee shop, it would need to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals for approval. That is one of the conditions of the approval that we're looking for tonight. So again, tonight you're approving the use specifically as presented by the applicant, which the applicant is presenting a use to have a coffee shop on a portable trailer within their parking lot. Should the increase in intensity or a change of use, if they decide that they want to do a beer cart instead of a coffee cart, they would have to come back for approval on that. If they wanted to change their cafeteria and use it as a coffee shop, a permanent basis, they would need to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals for your approval again. So again, you're
Based on the
approving
intensity.
the use variance of a coffee shop as being presented by the applicant tonight.
as I look at this opportunity and kind of think through the scope, and you look at, there's 21 spaces there, 8 used regularly, right? So that leaves us, 13 available at any one time, basically. Plus, you're looking at an organization that has, a great use in our community, to be honest with you. I think the mission is great. I think based on some of the back and forth that I've seen with Matt and the applicant, it appears as though they've been very responsive and receptive to feedback from the city.
Matt, how many parking spaces are required for the existing permanent structure?
The resident care facility requires 1 space per 5 residents, plus 1 space per employee on the largest shift.
Okay, so how many residents?
So we have 25 residents.
So
5
that's
spots?
5 spaces plus
2 to
on a
3.
shift, 3 to 4. So, I mean, the most you're gonna need technically by that is 8 or 9. So again, you're at 13 still available.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I do have a question. It says that the approval of the variance of use is limited to the coffee shop proposed by the applicant. So if they decide to sell this next week, what then? They can't sell it, can they?
They can,
Okay,
but
they
any
can.
change in use or increase in intensity by the current owners or any subsequent owners would require them to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Just revert
So
back
if they
to-
sold, if Teen Challenge sold, or if the coffee cart sold, the use is still permitted, but any increase in intensity, or again, if they decided to sell baked goods instead of coffee, it would require another public meeting for that variance request,
Okay.
for that change of use.
Thank you.
So when you say increase in intensity, this would, see, the way I'm viewing this is, okay, let's try this, and if it causes problems, traffic issues or anything like that, which personally for you, I think that'd be a great thing, then they would have to come back, because that would be an increase in intensity the way, okay, I wanted to make sure I knew what that meant. So basically, they're asking to do this, we're here to make a decision to approve it or not, and if it becomes very busy, then they would have to come back. Okay.
And
Then they're gonna buy a
to be
building.
honest, we're hoping it does.
Well, I
but
said, that would be
it-
great.
We are hoping it does. We're not gonna lie about that, but in that sense, we do have a lot of really good relationships in the community with business owners, with a couple of the banks like Farmers and stuff. We believe that we'd be positioned to either move our trailer, which is a nice part, is it's mobile, and we'd have to come and talk about that and get approval with that as well. But the cool part is, hopefully, we'll have a building too. But we'll be the first to say if it's causing problems, we don't want to do that for the community, and so we would very willingly and humbly do whatever is best, and if that means move it, we'll do that
Right.
immediately.
Well, in that case, you would have to come back and work with the,
Yeah,
Matt and everyone,
absolutely.
and then come back to us, but like I said, that would be a good thing.
Eventually, a great thing, yeah.
Hey, Matt, if this is approved, and I wanted to open a coffee shop in my driveway next month, would that be setting a precedence for me to be able to do that?
Not necessarily. You're in a primarily residential neighborhood. This particular property is within the Lebanon Street corridor, which again, historically has shown that it's a mixture of single-family, multifamily, and other small businesses along that corridor, and it's designed to be that. It's designed to incorporate a mixed-use neighborhood-type environment along there. Chadwick Village, Auburn Meadows.
That was
Ewan, those-
hypothetical. I mean,
Yeah.
like, what if I lived in a multifamily zone and not a residential zone?
I mean,
I still think there's
It's
a
a
number.
case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
It's dependent on which parcel you're specifically talking about and what is going on in that area. So no, not every multifamily, or not every parcel that is zoned multifamily would be allowed or set precedent to allow them to have a coffee shop. But this particular stretch of road is what we're talking about. So this is different than, like I said, like Chadwick Village or, the Marley neighborhood, places like that where it's primarily residential homes. That doesn't mean that your approval tonight does not make it easier for somebody to get a coffee shop or a bar or a restaurant approved for a neighborhood. And again, that would come back to you for approval because it would be a use variance, because it's something that would not be.
Which I would approve because.
Because it's your coffee shop, right? Yeah.
Nobody else would.
Okay, I think thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, this is a public meeting. Does anybody in the audience care to step forward? Okay, we will close the public end of the meeting. And I would entertain a motion, but, we're only giving them approval for the coffee shop, not necessarily the location that it is on the map, on the print, correct?
You're approving the use on the property. You're
Okay.
approving the use of the coffee shop on the property.
I would make a recommendation, Bruce, that we define increase in intensity of use. What does that mean?
That's what
Leaving it
I-
vague is actually more on our side than theirs, if I'm being honest. That lets us interpret it, not them. If I'm,
But you just explained that, the intensity of use. He wants that to.
Correct, yeah, the intensity of the use, again, I don't want to say it's designed to be subjective, our condition, but it does favor the city when it comes to approving use variances of this nature. If we do see that it's causing issues, if we do see that there is increased traffic, if we do find that it's very popular and it's starting to cause problems for the neighbors, the neighboring property owners, that would be considered an increase in intensity, thus allowing the city remediation to correct that issue.
I would just feel more comfortable if it wasn't subjective.
well, the
These are
problem
all,
is,
increase in use becomes a problem. These are all subjective. Like, that can mean something.
well, the problem with putting a number on it, so the intent of the applicant at this point is to not exceed 6 customers at any one time for a majority of the time, right? Versus if we place a number on it, not to exceed 6 ever, and their grand opening day, they have 8 show up at one time. That stinks, because technically they're out of use, but that's a one-time deal.
But the purpose of having that in there is to prevent that from happening. So,
A majority of the time.
That's also uncontrollable by us or by anyone. You could have even walk up, There could be 8 people walk up at one time.
I think the parking is the concern, so if we were to put anything in there, I would have it specific to cars, automobiles, trucks.
But if they find a legal parking spot elsewhere, are they then non-conforming? That's where the subjective gets,
Well,
that's why he gets paid
there's
the big
6,
bucks.
yeah, but there's 6 defined spaces, and that's not subjective. 6 identified spaces that to be used for this business. And so if they, if there's parking on the street, that's not part of those 6 spaces.
But you would have to be able to quantify and identify that that individual was using the coffee location and not any other location or have any other business in that area.
But that would be up to the applicant to police that.
It would be up to us to have to prove in court.
But they
That's
have
the-
additional
that's the hard
parking
part.
on site, so there's additional parking spaces on farther down on the other side that wouldn't stop anybody from using and walking through to
Yeah.
get coffee. So putting a number of customers, I guess, is what I'm hearing. I don't think we can.
Yeah, I don't know how we would police number of customers at a time, per hour, per day. And
Then why would we put it in there?
because if we see that it is causing problems, if we are out and about in the community, if a neighbor snaps a photo showing, hey, there's 4 cars lined up waiting to find a parking spot, we will have people that notice it and will notify us of those issues. And that would be an increase in intensity that we would have to work with the applicant to correct.
Yeah, if we receive a complaint, that sort of thing, it gives us action, an actionable event in this case.
It allows the city the ability to say, this situation is, the intensity is much more than what was anticipated based on the original approval, and then we'd be able to work again with the applicant and then come back to the board if necessary to propose an alternative arrangement. Again, we don't have any mechanism in place where we could police number of vehicles at a time, number of vehicles per hour, per day.
So we're just going to base it off complaints?
Complaints and routine inspections.
And again, I think, hearing the back and forth between the applicant and Matt as part of the office, they've clearly been in communication, had some of these conversations, are willing to work and want to be a good steward for the city as well, right? So not only do I think this is, a good thing to show the teens in your program, but this is also kind of a civics lesson, right? Like, hey, we want to do this, these are the hoops that we have to jump through to be able to do this. We did this
I don't think
application.
you'll have any argument from anybody here that it's not a great cause. But that's not what we're discussing.
Right, but again, I think that if we get into a situation, I think our what-ifs are, if this thing knocks it out of the park and, is making money hand over fist, I'd love to give you a loan for a building in downtown, but that's, a different hat that I wear. But, that's what we're all hoping happens, and it sounds like if it does happen, they're already willing to anticipate that and work with us pretty much on the spot, right? So I feel better knowing that coming into the conversation than the flip side where we're not really on the same side of the coin, if you will.
I have 2 questions, or comment and a question. I don't know that I closed the public end of the meeting. If I did, I'm going to do it again. Public end of the meeting is closed. But I have one question for the applicant. Is the trailer totally self-contained?
Can you come up to the microphone?
Yeah, the mic's for at home, so I apologize, you gotta come back up there.
So when you say self-contained, can you,
If you decide to move it down the street or whatever,
yeah.
do you have to run special power to it and water, and, is that?
So we already have the power and the water outside our building, so wherever we would move it, we would have access to it. So we have power outside of our building, and we have several water spigot spouts. And so us moving it, if we had to move it to a different spot, that's not gonna cause any issues.
But I guess what I was thinking, you brought up moving it to a bank parking lot possibly. You do not have, not that self-contained.
It is self-contained. So we have a generator, so there's a generator, and then there's also so to be approved with the health department, you have to have a certain size water tank and that, so there's a water tank and then there's our generator. So it's all fully self-contained, where if we were to move it even to a festival or a fair, we can use it without having to hook it up to power and hooking it up to water.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, does the board have any further questions, comments, or concerns?
I just want to make a comment on the word intensity. if we define too much there or put too many things in there, that's really going to limit to what we can do, where I think the number one condition with change in intensity protects the city to have you come back to work out something else. But if we get too specific on something like that, we can't, then it locks us in. I just think the condition is in there to protect the city if anything should come up that we would need to meet with them again and do some other planning. That's the way I see condition number one.
How do you define significant change? Can you? And intensity? Any change in use or increase in intensity?
Well, the change in use would be pretty obvious. They stop selling coffee and start selling something else. The increased intensity, we could define by not enough parking spaces. We could define as a line of cars parked out on the street. I don't know if there was,
That's what I
I guess,
just
again, it could
said.
be a variety of different measures that are either identified by city staff
That needs to be really
or identified by
protect the city.
neighboring property owners or just general citizens driving through the area.
And like I said, I think it needs to be broad and not just totally defined that gives the city more leverage if something does come up.
It does allow us more flexibility.
Yeah.
I believe that's the same verbiage we used recently in was it a garage variance we did down here on the south end of town where there was some concern about parking? Where it had the same condition in there with the exact same verbiage.
This is a common condition
Scott's
that
Garage.
this panel does apply to many of the variances and the use variances that you've approved in the past. It's common language, not necessarily verbatim, because I think we do identify coffee shop, but the change in use and change in increase in intensity
Right.
is common language that we normally use.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve docket number 23-23 with the following conditions. Would you like me to state the conditions word for word, or would you like me to say conditions 1, 2, and 3 of the staff recommendation?
That is fine, the staff recommendations.
Okay. That'll help the secretary write those down. So my motion is to approve 23-23 with the 3 staff recommended conditions, which are labeled 1, 2, and 3 on the staff report.
Second.
Kelly?
Okay. Corey Coons,
Yes?
Chad Kiger,
I'm going to say no, and it's mostly out of concern for the traffic on West Ulen, that being such a tight spot, and also the potential to set a precedence in other areas of multifamily zoning.
Bruce,
I'm going to say no because of the traffic on Ulen.
Ron,
Hi.
Lori.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries. Congratulations. Good luck. We have one final item tonight. Lebanon Community School Corporation, docket 2324. Property is located at 810 North Grant in Lebanon. Property is zoned institutional and comprised of approximately 62 acres. Rentals.
All right, guys, the last item for tonight, we have the school corporation that is proposing to build a new varsity softball field. The proposed location will be near the existing softball field, which is out in the sports complex area of Lebanon Middle School. So you can see Grant Street run along the west side here, the middle school property, existing baseball diamond, existing softball diamond, and the new softball diamond is proposed pretty much in center field of the existing softball diamond. In reviewing of the development plan application, staff did find that there are 4 variances that would be required, 2 specifically associated with the field itself, and 2 associated with the expanded parking area. So I'll pull up the site plan that has been proposed here, and I've kind of zoomed in here. We'll start on the parking area. As you can see, there is an existing parking area that is for the that serves the baseball diamond and the existing softball field. They are proposing to expand this parking area. This existing parking area currently is not curbed, and they would like relief from the curbing requirements so that they could continue to sheet drain from this area through the field to the adjacent storm swales. So they are asking for a variance for relief from the parking area curbing. The next request is for the parking lot as well, and that is parking lot perimeter landscaping. The current parking lot does not have any perimeter landscaping. They are proposing to extend a sidewalk along the parking area and also add a fence line on the west side of that sidewalk, thus not allowing any room for that parking perimeter landscaping. So they are requesting relief from the parking perimeter landscaping requirements. The next 2 variances pertain to the softball field itself. And I'll scroll up here. As you can see, there is a concrete pathway that will be, an asphalt pathway that will be leading out to the new ball diamond. And I clicked too far. Our UDO standards do not allow on a sports field. We have a maximum illumination intensity of 40-foot candles. IHSAA requirements require a minimum of 50-foot candles for the infield, so our UDO does not allow for the specific illumination that is required by the State Athletic Association. So the applicant's seeking a variance to allow an increase in intensity of that foot candles. And then lastly, our UDO prohibits scoreboard and PA systems on lots less than 75 acres, which this particular property is 62 acres, and also prohibits them within 500 feet of a private residentially owned or used property, which all of the properties along the west side of the school property are residential. So the applicant's requesting relief to permit a new scoreboard and PA system to be associated with this new softball diamond. I don't want to go through all the statutory criteria. Just for the record, I'll indicate that all the statutory criteria has been analyzed by staff for all 4 variances. We kind of talked about the parking area curbing. The existing parking area is not curbed. It currently sheet drains. The applicant's proposing to continue the sheet draining in that area. The parking lot perimeter landscaping, again, it would not be feasible with the sidewalk and the fence line that is being proposed. So the applicant is requesting relief from that landscaping requirement on the new parking area. Staff did analyze the statutory criteria and found compliance. With the maximum level of lighting and illumination, I'll kind of just touch on a few things. The increase in intensity of the illumination poses no imminent threat to the public health, safety, general welfare of the community. In fact, it actually increases safety on the playing field by actually meeting the IHSAA safety standards. The area adjacent to the property and included in the variance would not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. As we've shown, there are existing baseball, softball, and even soccer fields on this property that have lights on some of them. So this new increase in intensity and this additional lighting would not have an adverse effect, especially when you consider that modern technology and LED lighting is much more focused on the playing field. if any of you remember, or been by the Little League at night, the old Little League lights kind of light up the entire neighborhood, but the newer LED-designed lights actually just light up the area, so spillage is not an issue on the neighboring property owners. And then strict applications of the terms of the UDO would result in practical difficulties. As I mentioned, the requirements of IHSAA require a minimum of 50-foot candles for the infield playing area. Requiring the schools to meet this RUDO standard of 40 would prevent the schools from being able to have an IHSAA-approved varsity-level softball field. And then lastly, the scoreboards and the public address systems. Again, we have existing facilities on site that have scoreboards and PA systems. The new PA system will be set up to point the sound at the fans and at the playing area. They would not be pointed at the neighboring property owners. Will they be able to hear it? Probably, but not any more or any less than what the existing conditions are on the site. And again, IHSA requirements require a scoreboard and a PA system on all playing fields, so strict application of the terms of the UDO would result in practical difficulties in not allowing the schools to have a varsity-level certified, IHSA certified softball playing field. And with that, in review of all the criteria, the Lebanon planning staff does recommend approval of the 4 variance requests to permit relief from the parking area curbing, parking lot perimeter landscaping, the maximum level of lighting illumination, and relief from the scoreboard and public address system section of the UDO. And happy to answer any questions you may have on those.
Is this replacing the existing field?
It is not. This is a brand-new field.
addition to, okay.
In addition to, let me scroll out a little bit on this site here, and you can kind of get a better idea. So this is the existing softball diamond. The new one will be built almost directly in center field of the existing, and I believe it is the school's intent to keep the existing softball diamond as a JV and/or practice field.
Is it IHSAA conforming, the existing one?
That's a great question.
Is that the, I just wonder if that's the reason for the new field?
I'll let the applicant answer that
Okay.
question when it's time.
No pressure.
Anything else for me? If not, we
That's
can.
it, I guess it's time.
Hello, I'm Bob Ross with Schmidt Associates. I'm now with the school with the architect record on design for this project. As to the current existing field, I don't know if we have the foot candle levels on that field, but they are the old style lights, whereas this would be the new style LED with the shields where it has less spillway. They are looking at upgrading the existing lights at the softball field to be the new lights as well, but depending on budget, they may or may not move forward with that.
And I believe this adds ADA compliance, correct?
Yes,
If I
so
recall.
the sidewalks right now to the existing field is kind of concrete and gravel-ish to get there. And so as part of this project to the new and existing field will be concrete sidewalks that are ADA, meet ADA requirements.
If we approve this for this new field, they won't have to come back and get approval if they decide to upgrade the lights on the existing field? Is that right, Matt?
That is correct. The variances apply to the property in general, not to the specific ball field. So
Right.
if they do decide to build a third softball diamond, these variances would be applicable to
Okay.
any new change.
Unless you wanted to put the condition of varying intensity and,
I was thinking about it.
How are we
Because there's going to be some overlap.
assured, I
in there.
guess is the word, that lights won't be left on all night, or PA system won't be on all night, you know, after a game?
So for like the PA system, someone usually has to man that for the game, so they'll be the talking, so that will more than likely be off. Now, if they were playing music or whatever, I don't believe they do that now, but if music's were turned on, I would assume the neighbors are gonna complain, and the school will be more than happy to turn that off. They don't want it they want to make the neighbors happy. So they'll have someone to be able to turn that off. And then as for the lights, actually everything's controlled by your phone now. And so the AD or the softball coach can turn it off via their phone. So if it did get left on, they can do it very easily.
Where are they going to relocate football practice to?
So as part of this project as well, the maintenance area, just north of there, there's kind of a wooded area. It's kind of just west of that is where
Okay.
the practice field is proposed to go.
In the woods, yeah.
In the woods itself, and there's like a little area that is flat that they're gonna regrade for middle school practice.
Questions?
I can confirm from personal experience that if the EPA is used at off times, the neighbors will in fact report it. We had an incident when I was on the Little League board where it got reported that someone entered the facility at off hours and played some music, so.
Yes, and with all the work the school's doing, I know that they want to be good neighbors, so they will be willing to do what they need to.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As a public meeting, anybody from the audience care to step forward? We'll close the public end of the meeting and look for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the 4 variances of docket 2324, which are relief from parking lot curbing, relief from parking lot perimeter landscaping, relief from maximum level of lighting illumination, and relief from scoreboard and PA system requirements.
Second.
Corey Coots?
Yes.
Chad Kiger?
Aye.
Bruce Polly?
Aye.
Ron Edwards?
Aye.
Lori Gross?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations. I think that is pretty much it for tonight. Any other items to talk about? Okay. Our next regular meeting will be Monday, May 1st, 7 p.m. this room. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.